The ceramic mug exploded against the marble floor, dark coffee blooming across the spotless white tiles like a spreading bruise. My mother's hands shook as she stared at me, her face pale and stunned. Behind her, my father clutched the edge of the countertop so tightly his knuckles blanched. "Good morning," I said calmly, settling into a bar stool at the kitchen island. "I assume you received my letter about your new mortgage holder, but let's rewind a bit. You need to understand how we got here." 3 days earlier, I'd sat in this same kitchen, though the mood was very different. It was meant to be a typical Sunday dinner, a tradition my mother insisted on since Victoria and I were kids. But recently, these dinners had become less about family and more about showcasing status. Victoria, my sister and eternal family star, had just been promoted to senior vice president of acquisitions at her firm. She made sure we all knew it, slipping her title into every conversation. Meanwhile, I had just left my corporate job to launch my own financial consulting business, a move no one at this table understood. "Emma's in her little rebellious phase," Victoria announced that night, slicing her chicken with precise contempt, throwing away a steady career to find herself. "Adorable." I focused on my plate, nudging around the limp vegetables. After 15 years managing billion-dollar portfolios, I'd finally dared to step out on my own. But to them, anything short of a prestigious title was a disgrace. "I'm not finding myself," I said softly. "I'm building something." "Building what?" My father scoffed. "A vanity project that won't pay the bills? Your sister just closed a $50 million deal. What have you done lately besides disappoint us?" The words cut deep, but I stayed silent. They didn't know about the clients I'd signed. The deal's already underway. Arguing only fueled their cruelty. "Speaking of disappointments," Victoria added, her voice syrupy and sharp, "I heard Morrison Financial is about to foreclose on a few local properties, including this house. Care to explain, Dad?" The room fell silent. My father flushed crimson, my mother suddenly fascinated by her wine glass. "That's none of your business," my father snapped, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. I already knew. I'd tracked their missed mortgage payments through my network, 3 months overdue, with Morrison circling like sharks. But there was something they didn't know. Morrison was about to sell that debt portfolio, and I was waiting. If Emma hadn't quit her job, she could help, Victoria said sweetly. "Oh wait, she can barely help herself." Then my mother spoke, not to defend me, but to push me further away. "Emma, maybe it's best if you stop coming to dinner for a while, until you get your life together. You don't belong here anymore," Victoria sneered. "This is for successful family only." I rose slowly, the scrape of my chair echoing like a gunshot. "You're right," I said, voice steady. "I don't belong here, not anymore." They didn't know that I had already solved their problem in a way they'd never expect. Just the day before, I finalized the acquisition of Morrison Financial's local debt portfolio. Their mortgage now belonged to me, through my newly formed investment company. As I left that night, I pulled out my phone and emailed my lawyer. It was time to notify them of their new creditor. Now, 3 days later, I watched the coffee creep across the floor. Some lessons can't be taught gently. My family was about to learn that the hard way. "Shall we discuss your payment options?" I asked, sliding a thick folder onto the counter. "Or would you rather talk about why you're 3 months behind?" Their stricken faces promised a very interesting morning ahead. Victoria stormed in just as I spread out the documents, her heels snapping angrily against the marble. "What twisted game is this?" she shouted, waving her phone showing my company's letter. "You can't possibly. I own your mortgage." I cut in, my voice cool and precise. I pushed a paper across the counter. "EW Financial Holdings, my company. We acquired Morrison Financial's local portfolio last week." "A steal, really?" My father snatched up the papers, his hands trembling as he scanned the lines. "This is impossible," he muttered. "You couldn't possibly afford. What I can or can't afford stopped being your business the moment you decided I wasn't welcome at your table," I replied coolly. "But since you're suddenly so interested in my finances, allow me to clarify." I opened my laptop and pulled up a presentation I had prepared precisely for this moment. While Victoria was busy flaunting her $50 million deal, I closed one worth $380 million. "Those client meetings you mocked, they were with international investors. That hobby business you all dismissed, it's now one of the fastest growing financial firms in the region." My mother finally tore her eyes away from the spilled coffee. She looked at me as though she was seeing a ghost. "But how?" she managed to whisper. Because unlike Victoria, I didn't need to shout my every move from the rooftops. I didn't need your validation. While you were all too busy mocking me, I was quietly building an empire. Victoria's face was now a deep crimson. This is absurd, she snapped, her voice rising. You're bluffing. I'll have my firm's lawyers handle this immediately. I smiled, leaning forward slightly. You mean Anderson and Pierce? Fascinating you mention them. They lost their biggest client this morning, to me. The silence that followed was almost musical. Victoria's phone buzzed, and she snatched it up, her eyes scanning the screen, her face drained of color. You, she whispered, finally piecing it together. You've been planning this. No, Victoria, I said softly, you all set this in motion. I simply took advantage of your arrogance. I turned to my parents, who now looked decades older than they had moments before. Now, regarding your mortgage, you have two options. Option 1, pay everything you owe immediately, $43,000, including late fees. Option 2, I begin foreclosure proceedings tomorrow. You wouldn't, my mother gasped, her voice quivering. We're your family. Family? I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Was I family when you excluded me? When you ridiculed my choices? When you chose Victoria's pride over my accomplishments? Finally, my father, the eternal negotiator, spoke up. How much? How much what? I asked, feigning innocence. To buy back the mortgage. Name your price. I leaned back in my chair, studying their worn faces. My mother's carefully crafted image was falling apart, her mascara smeared from nervous tears. Victoria looked like an actress out of costume, her designer clothes unable to mask her humiliation. My father no longer looked like the powerful patriarch, just a desperate man cornered by his own daughter. You still don't understand, I said quietly. This was never about money. This is about consequences. You believed your success made you untouchable, that your money made you superior, even to me. I stood, collecting my papers. You have 24 hours. Pay what's due or pack your things. As I headed toward the door, Victoria's voice cracked behind me. You can't just leave us like this. I paused, glancing back one last time. I can, I said. After all, you told me this was for successful people only, remember? The door clicked shut behind me, leaving them alone with their reality. But this wasn't the end, not even close. Tomorrow would bring even bigger shocks. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, not because I owned their mortgage, but because I had finally stepped beyond their judgment and control. As I drove away, my phone started vibrating with messages and calls, desperate attempts to reach me now that the power dynamic had shifted. The next morning, my phone came alive with a flood of notifications, texts, voicemails, emails, all from family members who suddenly realized they needed me. I sat in my office, a sleek, glass-walled corner on the top floor of the city's most coveted tower, and scanned their frantic messages. Victoria had sent 15 texts, each one pinging between threats and tearful pleas. My mother's voicemails grew more desperate by the hour. But it was my father's single email that caught my eye. We need to meet privately. I smiled as I typed my response. My office, 10 a.m. At exactly 10 o'clock, my assistant ushered them in. They looked wrecked, dark circles under their eyes, hair undone, clothes slightly askew, a far cry from the polished images they clung to so desperately. Victoria's gaze swept the room, the panoramic city view, the modern art, the quiet luxury of real success. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she were seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. Please, sit, I gestured calmly. I assume you've made a decision about the mortgage. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain his old authority. Emma, we've done some digging. Your company, it isn't just about mortgages, is it? I tilted my head, amused. Impressive, you finally looked past your assumptions. Yes, EW Financial Holdings is far more than a mortgage business. I swiveled my computer screen toward them, a single slide open. This morning, we acquired majority ownership in Victoria's firm. Victoria lurched to her feet. That's impossible. Anderson and Pierce is private. It was private, I corrected calmly. Your senior partners were eager to sell once they saw their biggest clients leaving. Do you know why those clients left? Because I bought their companies too. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Emma, what have you done? What have I done? I echoed softly. I stood and stepped to the window. letting them sit with the silence, while you mocked my hobby business. I was building an empire. Every dinner where you ridiculed me, I was finalizing deals. Every family event you left me out of, I was closing acquisitions. I pointed across the skyline. That tower, mine. The one beside it, also mine. The luxury condos where Victoria lives, purchased last month. The country club you love to brag in, I closed on it last week. My father's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell us? I turned to face them. Would you have listened, or would you have twisted it into another disappointment? Victoria had sunk back into her chair, her eyes hollow. What happens now? She finally whispered. I returned to my seat, folding my hands on the desk. Now, I said, we renegotiate, not just the mortgage, your job. Victoria, you can stay, but you'll start at entry level. Mom, Dad, you can keep the house, but under new terms, and new rules. My father's eyes narrowed. You're blackmailing us. I shook my head. No, I'm finally teaching you what you never taught me. Actions have consequences. Respect is earned, not demanded. I pulled out 3 folders and handed one to each. These are my terms, read them carefully. This isn't only about money, it's about family, real family, how we treat each other, what we will and won't tolerate going forward. My mother stared at the papers, her voice barely a whisper. You want us to sign a family contract? You turned family into a transaction long ago, I said evenly. I'm just making it official. Victoria's hands trembled as she flipped through her folder. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry, she choked out. I didn't understand. No, I agreed, none of you did, but now, you have a choice, sign, and we rebuild something better, or don't, and live with the consequences. Slowly, one by one, they signed, not just a piece of paper, but an acknowledgement of my power, of their failures, of a new order. As they stood to leave, my father paused at the door. We were so wrong about you, Emma. I nodded once. Yes, you were. By the way, Sunday dinner is at my house this week. Don't be late.